Okay, I think.
Okay, I see live on Facebook there.
Live on Facebook. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the TEFL Development Hub and this week's webinar, where I'm joined with Ceri Jones to talk about developing beyond the classroom. We've talked a couple of times before about a problem with the chat, with the comments on the Facebook live video. I found last week when I was using my phone, if I just tapped on the video and then that seemed to open the video in a new window on my phone, and all the comments seemed to stream just fine. So fingers crossed that will work for you today. Okay, so Ceri is joining me today. I posted on Twitter the other day, like, I get to talk to so many great people in the hub. So far we've had Chris Rowlands and we had Harry Waters, and then we've got Ceri Jones. And I actually, when I did my Cert TESOL back in 2002, I had to buy one of Ceri's course books as part of the required reading. It was a former version of Inside Out, one of the previous incarnations of Inside Out. But obviously, Ceri has been involved in ELT and has had a wonderful career, which is what we're going to make the most of today and talk about all our different options, including talking about getting into writing. So here's another one of Ceri's books, along with Dan Barber, and she's all over the grammar as well, which is just fantastic. So Ceri, thank you so much for coming along.
Thank you for the invite.
And I mean, we've kind of talked about the areas that we're going to be discussing today, and there is just so much in the world of ELT, and we'll basically just scratch the surface, but hopefully we'll give people a bit of an idea about some different options. So let's start out by thinking about further qualifications, because you did an MA in TEFL.
That's right. I did what was a Delta first back in the day, which is now the diploma and the Delta, and then I did the MA after 10 years of teaching. So I did my diploma after 2 years, and then I did the masters after another 8 years of teaching. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what made you decide to do a master's, having already done the kind of Delta diploma style?
It was, at the time I was working in Italy, and this was back in the 90s, when there was no equivalence or recognition of qualifications amongst European countries. And so if I had wanted to go into any of the Italian systems, like, for example, working at the universities or a school or whatever, my first degree and my PGCE didn't count. I would have needed something additional. So that was kind of like the pragmatic side of it. But also there was kind of like an itch after 10 years of wanting to develop more and do something more academic, I guess. Kind of, sort of the diploma was great, but I did that pretty early on. I did it in my second year of teaching, and it was quite a deep end challenge. I didn't do a cert. I did a PGCE in English and modern languages, and then started teaching TEFL from that without a TEFL qualification. So I felt like I needed to do the diploma quite early on, and that was quite a challenge, but I really enjoyed that. But then it felt like after that it was kind of, there was a danger of stagnation, I guess. So there was this thing of looking for new directions. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so, having experienced both a kind of Delta style and MA, you mentioned the more academic side of an MA. Do you think that's something that's missing on Deltas and diplomas?
No, I don't think so at all. I think they're pretty academic as well, actually, as a higher level qualification. There's quite a lot of reading and research required, and I think that's fine. I'm just remembering now, another factor in wanting to do the MA was that I'd started working on EAP courses, English for Academic Purpose courses, pre-sessional courses in the UK, which is working with students who are going into the UK university system and need language support, but also study skills. But I was working with people who are going to do MAs and PhDs and write dissertations and supposedly teaching them how to do referencing and style. And I felt like I felt like a fraud. It was, I haven't written a dissertation. Maybe I should write a dissertation in order to be able to teach other people to write a dissertation. And so that was also part of it, because that was one of the directions I thought maybe I might want to follow as well, was to continue with that kind of study skills, language support for postgraduate students. And so like I felt, well, I should be a postgraduate student myself. So, and it was fun. I think the whole idea of going back to uni for a year was very appealing.
Excellent, very good. And so having done the MA, do you feel that that had a positive impact in your teaching? I mean, you talk about being able to talk to students about skills. Did it affect your classroom practice in any other way?
Yeah, I mean, I think you were showing the grammar books. One of the modules we had to do, I did a taught MA at Reading with a research-based dissertation as the third module. So there's 2 modules taught, and in the first term, 1 module was grammar. And we had to parse, and I'd never done that before. So, sort of taking sentences apart and doing the kind of things that if you work in Spain and I'm imagining other kind of more traditional school systems, the idea of parsing is something that kids do in school anyway. And so, but this was the first, and I remember really kicking against the traces and like, what is the point of this? This is a waste of time. I don't need to do this, etc., etc. But then slowly kind of getting really into it and getting enamored of it. And afterwards, it was only afterwards that I realized that it really, really did give a boost to my language analysis skills myself, and made it so much easier to teach, definitely. But it's not that I would teach that, it's just that it gave me a stronger depth and background, I think, and probably led to me getting involved in grammar materials writing.
Good to know. Yeah, I think definitely, I mean, one thing that I found when I did the DIP TESOL was it just made me reflect a lot more on teaching practice and the kind of things that I do in the classroom, and that idea of why as well. I mean, we had quite a good question yesterday in the hub about kind of giving explicit objectives, and I think it does make you appreciate more what you're doing, whether you translate that to the students or not, or how you translate that to the students as well. But it definitely gives you that deeper sense of I know what I'm doing now.
Another thing we had to do as part of the MA was we had to write a research-based dissertation. So we did modules on analyzing research and actually data analysis, which is something that I'd never studied, having done a degree in English literature. I'd never been anywhere near data analysis before. And so, but what that did actually was give me a much stronger basis for being able to critically read research articles in academic journals and actually get more out of them and be able to identify a weak sample or a limited research, or not to just be kind of bowled over by the new ideas, but to be able to question them and say, well, yes, okay, up to a point, yes, works in your context, this and so. So I think maybe also it was a really good excuse to develop critical faculties. And I'm not saying that you have to do an MA to do that. You can do that totally on your own. It was just that it gave time out, so like we're all so busy when we're just thrown into the world of work that it was nice to have, it was like a real indulgence, I guess. Yeah.
So, I mean, when you did your MA, did you take a year out from teaching, or were you doing it? It was a full-time course.
It was a full-time course for 6 months. As I say, there were 3 modules, 2 modules were taught. So from October through to April, I guess it would have been two university terms, was full-time, taught in Reading And then the third term, we were starting on identifying our research project, doing the literary review and stuff like that. So that meant at the time you needed to be near a physical library, because this is like, we're talking about the 90s. And well, we had university emails. Yeah, that was exciting. But during that term, I also did some work at the university on some courses that they were running there. So that was interesting to be able to do the two things at the same time. But yeah, it was expensive in the sense that I needed to use my savings in order to be able to pay both the fees I got a business loan for, and then I wasn't working for at least 6 months, and so that meant that I had to have that amount of money set aside.
Yeah, because I've noticed with the Trinity diploma, obviously you need to be teaching, because so much of what you're doing, you're meant to be putting it into practice, and also for the projects and things. But actually, you need to really carefully consider how many hours you are teaching, because it's just so overwhelming, the amount of new knowledge that you're getting during the course.
Yeah, I think, sort of ideally, I still think that it's better to do it extensively so that you're studying and experimenting in the classroom, and then but some people just can't afford to take the cut in hours that you need in order to be able to follow the course well, I think. So that's something to really bear in mind as well. And so so maybe you want that intensive hit of going mad for a couple of months.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, it definitely is a little bit mad for a couple of months. I love, we had a message here from JG saying, during the dip, I vowed I'd never study again, but I'm getting the itch, a new challenge. So maybe.
So I've always vowed after the MA was, I am no way I'm doing a PhD, and I'm still no way I'm doing a PhD. Give it a go, JG, and then maybe sort of you might go the extra mile as well, become Dr. JG.
Yeah. I just a friend up in Barcelona, Dirk Lagerberg.
Yeah.
His PhD this week. He presented his Viva.
Yes.
Yeah. So you can definitely go all the way in ELT if you want to.
Absolutely.
So let's think, going back to the further qualification, you talked about how that was a lot to do with there not being I can't think of the word in English, homologación, the
equivalence, I think.
Yeah, the crossover between
or reciprocity or whatever. Yeah.
That's the one, well, I can't say it.
Which we as Brits are about to, have lost again. So
that's true. So with the MA, do you feel that it opened up a lot of new opportunities for you in terms of what jobs you were able to go for?
I felt at the time that it did kind of add an extra bit of clout to my CV, and the year after I finished my MA, I decided to stay in the UK for two reasons. One was financial, because, as I say, I had to take out a business loan to pay for the fees because I didn't qualify for a student loan. And unlike student loans, business loans, you have to start paying back the minute after you finish your course. So I needed to be earning a wage to pay back a loan that I'd taken out in a bank in the UK, and working most places outside of the UK just weren't going to be paying well enough. So and also I wanted to try what it was like to work within kind of the academic side of ELT. So I looked for jobs at universities and teacher training colleges, that kind of thing. And I got a job in Canterbury, in what was Christchurch College Canterbury at the time, and is now University of Christchurch College, I think. I don't even know the name, I should know. But it's one of the new universities. And so I worked and that was because it was 18 hours teaching and I could work on my dissertation at the same time. And they had a great library and it was a different way of working. And so, but after a year and I'd finished my MA, I'd actually had enough and I wanted to go abroad again. So I was trying for DOS, Director of Studies posts in various places. And I think it did help. And I did get a range of offers that I could consider. So it was like really nice to be able to choose where to go next.
Cool. Well, I mean, let's move on to think about kind of academic management positions and dossing around. One thing that I found is, and I think other people have found the same, that kind of these higher qualifications, thinking more perhaps about the practical side, like the diploma and the Delta, always necessarily helping people or preparing people for a DOS role, although many DOS positions ask for it.
Yes. I mean, there is a management diploma run by International House that I'm aware of, which would certainly be a more focused, targeted qualification to go for. But I don't think it's very widespread. I don't know. I have no empirical basis for saying that, but I don't think it's very widespread. Yeah, quite. I mean, it's one of those career moves where you don't really get any training to do it formally, and you have to learn it on the job. And it tends to be one of those, I don't know if they still call it the sitting with Nelly apprenticeship type of things that sitting with Nelly was when the apprentice would sit with the seamstress and learn through watching and never being taught, that it was all just mirroring, sort of, and you learn from an experienced professional, but they're not teaching you. And I think that's very much what a lot of directors of studies do as well, is that I'm going to put a we here because I spent quite a long time in that post, so I still feel I qualify as one. We learn through seeing what other director of studies do, people that we've worked under, people that we've worked with, and we learn from people's strengths and weaknesses. I think, like with anything else, it's kind of like, I'm going to do that when I'm the DOS. That's definitely something I'm going to do. Or, oh my God, I am never making that mistake. And so it is that kind of apprenticeship thing. And also it's like, what is a DOS job? And it's so different in so many different contexts. In fact, you could almost say that every single school, it's different. So what does it cover? What doesn't it cover? What are your responsibilities? Is it purely academic? Are you going to be expected to know anything about business side, etc.? So it's, I guess, yeah, it's very valid, is that there is no specific training for it.
Yeah. I mean, like you say, so much depends on the school that you're working at as well. Yeah. Working in a bigger organization, you might already have a lot of systems in place, whereas if you're DOSing in a smaller school, you might have a lot more freedom to change things and
create your own systems, or you might not even freedom. It might be like you have to, because they're not in place, and it makes your life a misery if you don't have systems in place, that you end up having to put them in place. But going back to the MA, one of the modules was business, and not as in teaching business English, but the business side of particularly managing schools, which I audited but didn't take, if you know what I mean, because I wasn't really interested in that aspect enough to take it on and do the assignment and get the credit, but I did audit it, so it was interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, you've had quite a few academic management roles. What did you particularly enjoy about working in that kind of position?
I think I kind of, whilst I was doing it, I boiled it down to what I wanted my role to be and believed that my role should be, was to make it as easy as possible for teachers to do their jobs to the best of their abilities. So, which means everything from supporting individual teachers, giving a balanced timetable, ensuring that resources are available, managing the flow of resources, even silly things like, are there enough board markers, or now it would be, have you got a Zoom account? So it's kind of for me, that was the role of the DOS. Is definitely the intermediary in the middle, easing things. So you're also a buffer for you talk to parents or students or stakeholders who may have complaints or questions that the teacher doesn't need to be bothered with. It's kind of that isn't part of doing their job well. That's part of being kind of middle management, I guess. And so the other one then is, depending on the size of your school, and I've worked in quite a large school in Madrid, was to also be the voice of the teacher towards higher management. So it was kind of negotiating there. But this kind of role of, you need to be aware of everybody's needs, and you're kind of there in the middle, trying to make sure that as many people are as happy as they can be, and of which no one can ever be completely happy.
Unfortunately not, no. And I mean, we've obviously lots of schools have this kind of structure where, you know, there are the teachers, perhaps there's an ADOS, then a DOS, then the management. What kind of options do you think there are for people to get more involved in the running of the school without moving into a kind of management position?
I think that it obviously again depends on the school, but usually if you have some kind of interest in doing something beyond your classroom walls, as it were, and it's absolutely fine not to, because as a teacher, that's your domain. But there might be an extracurricular interest that you've got that you could somehow share with other teachers within the school. So I'm thinking things like JG here, a drama club, for example, or a film club, a reading club, a maker's space, something like that. So kind of maybe having the initiative and the enthusiasm to put something like that to the school, to offer, to set it up, to give it a go, that kind of thing. So that's one would be if you have yourself personal interests that you'd really like to be able to explore, and that gives you a chance to see what the complications and frustrations might be of setting up a system. Maybe you learn about factors that you hadn't been aware of before, and that can be quite a learning experience. And if you enjoy that, then maybe you enjoy doing a little bit more on the management side of things. And then, I don't know, it depends on the structure of the institution that you're working in or the school that you're working in, whether there are coordination posts available. So there might be a specific project that needs a coordinator. Or in the case of a private language school, there might be a specific contract that needs a coordinator. So, for example, personally, my first coordination post, again, was my first job in Italy. We were working with a telecom firm and giving classes on site at the factory. And I became the on-site coordinator because I was teaching most of the classes, and so it was just natural that I would be kind of the go-between. But that then kind of became formalized as a coordinator's post as the contract grew, because they needed more and more admin type questions answering, etc. And so that kind of organically became what it was because of the situation. And my feeling and my experience of TEFL is that very often things are organic in that way, that I didn't go there with the intention of coordinating that contract, but I ended up coordinating it. And so and it kind of like in my first year of teaching there's no way I could have, because I didn't have any Italian practically. But by the second year, it was okay. And it was also a great way to push me to really improve my Italian, because then I was going to have to coordinate and stuff. So it's kind of like this organic thing of picking up on the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. I mean, I think what you say about if it's something that you're interested in and would like to take beyond your own classroom, it's a great way to build the community within the school as well. And then, like you say, you get noticed, whether you're in a small school or a bigger school, what you do does get noticed and then hopefully leads on to other things as well.
If that's what you're interested in as well. I think also it helps you to find out where your strengths and weaknesses lie, where your interests lie, what kind of direction you might want to follow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so now moving on to something which I know neither of us is interested in. Owning your own school.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that's never really appealed to you about that?
I have never wanted to or been attracted by the business side of teaching. It, as as you say, like if you go into management, you spend less and less time in the classroom. As a DOS, that can happen, but you can spend a lot of time observing, training, supporting. You're still very much part of the mechanism of teaching and learning, and that's the side that interests me. Also doing the MA, the thing that interests me is the how people learn, how can we facilitate that, sort of. So I balk at the business side. I don't think I'd be good at it at all. I hate having to balance accounts or look after money, especially other people's money, and the whole responsibility of it. I think I would not enjoy. I think it would just take joy out of life.
I mean, to be honest, it's when I first came to Spain, I was newly qualified, and I just kind of assumed that I would end up owning my own school because I went to work in a school where the owners, it was a small family business. There were like 5 teachers, including the 2 owners, and so it just seemed like that was the natural progression. But then strangely, how you're not keen on managing money, I'm not keen on managing people.
Okay.
And
Whereas I love that. I love the people management side of things, but the money, just don't let me near the money.
Yeah. But I mean, what do you think are the reasons why somebody might choose to open a school?
Okay, so I think, so interestingly, my first school that I worked at was very similar to yours. And this is just like a quick aside, but they, as well as running and owning and teaching in their own school, the 2 owners also wrote materials. So they were role models for me in a different direction. But someone I was working, in fact, more than one of the teachers who came through the school did go on to open their own schools. And I think it's the freedom, the independence, you choose how to do it, what to do, you see a niche. So one friend, she set up a tots and parents school, which was really cute, and that they would come in and do all of the crafts work in English, and the parents were encouraged, but they didn't have to, but were encouraged to come in and take part in the classes as well. So it was kind of like a crafts club class, more than, but we're talking very young learners, and that's what she had found, that from all of the different types of classes that she was teaching within this small school, because obviously the smaller the school, the more a jack of all trades you have to be. And she'd spotted her niche, and that's what she wanted to do, but she couldn't do that within the school because she had to take all the different kinds of classes in order to have a full timetable. And so she decided she did want to run her own business. And I know lots of people who've made that decision, and it's great, because I think that is, in the end, it's that I have a clear vision of the kind of school I want to run. And I think I can do it because I've spotted, you know, a niche or a need or a gap in this particular market or whatever. So absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Lovely. I was thinking as well, like other reasons why people might want to start their own business. I think kind of, although when you're a teacher, obviously you become a part of the community if you stay somewhere for long enough. So often in our profession, you know, people might tend to spend a couple of years somewhere, then go somewhere else. I think definitely if you make that decision to open a school, thinking about a physical school,
Yeah.
you do become a bigger part of that community and build relationships with the people there as well, which I think is a
Yeah, you offer a service, don't you? And you know,
Mhm.
so it's kind of we've seen in, you know, in some markets, language schools are seen as essential services, and so are open during lockdown, even when all other non-essential services have closed. You know, so it's
Mhm.
kind of school has a role to play in a community, and so that must be very gratifying to be the person who is sustaining that role. So it would be another, I mean, maybe not the reason you do it, but once you start doing it, something that really motivates you and sustains you, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Still not for me.
yeah, me neither. So moving on to something that we both do thoroughly enjoy,
Yeah,
conferences. Um, do you remember your first conference experience?
I do. Um, I I think that I kind of just totally landed on my feet with my first job, and I might have to. I stayed at the same school for 10 years, so it's like so I'm going to give it a plug. The English School of L'Aquila, Mark and Marion, amazing employers. They paid for us all to go to the annual national, what was at the time British Council conference in Italy, and it was in Bologna, which in itself was just like, oh, amazing, you know. So we got to visit the city, but also obviously it was a 4-day conference over a weekend, and I had no idea, but I saw Crashen in the flesh and Widdowson and Mario Rinvolucri. We did a workshop with Mario Rinvolucri taking our shoes off and writing upside down and all these kind of wonderful things. And I just took it for granted. It was like, yeah, you know, this is what first year teachers do. And only later did I realize how really, really lucky we'd been that it was all expenses paid, you know, sort of like travel, hotel, restaurants in Bologna and everything. So and it was such a positive first conference experience, as it were, that I thought like, oh, okay, I think I'm gonna like these. And yeah, and it was and sadly that conference doesn't exist anymore. I don't think. There's a TESOL Italy conference.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And did you ever speak at that conference?
Yes, once in Rome with a friend I was teaching with in L'Aquila, and we actually, my first material project was with her, and we wrote Inside Out together as well. But our first project was a pair workbook, and so my first conference talk was with her, and we gave it in promoting this pair work book.
Wow.
And I remember that we had at the time, it was like, whoa, our PowerPoint with a huge big image of a bright green tropical frog, which was one of our pair work stimuluses. And we also took in squash rackets and ball to play a little bit of squash to show the use of realia. And so we were just like completely OTT in our first conference talk. It's like, who are these two mad women? So it was great fun. It was really great fun. So another shout out to Tanya Basto, who was definitely my partner in crime for a lot of amazing projects.
That's fantastic. Excellent. And I mean, obviously you've had experience speaking now at conferences all around the world.
Okay, so no, not all around the world at all, but and I have to voice some eco guilt on this one. I have been to conferences in Latin America. That's kind of my long distance travel has been to Mexico, to an amazing British Council event in Mexico, but which is not without its controversies, because it is an absolutely amazing whistles, bells, everything. I mean, we had disco balls and loud music before the plenaries, sort of like the plenary speaker walks on stage to this amazing reception. And so, but it was full of local teachers, which was wonderful. It was about, I think, in the plenaries, there were 900 to 1,000 people, and that's the biggest room I've ever spoken to. But it was, there's this thing about so much money being spent on one conference in the capital, in a country where really education needs so much grassroots support. So it was like that. That's one of the controversies of it. And this thing of, flying people in from Europe, really? You don't need to. There's some great people on the ground who could have done a better job because they're grounded in the context of standing on that stage with the disco balls and the loud music. So that Brazil, Peru, those are the countries that I've traveled to. Otherwise, it's been in Europe. Yeah.
Very good. And I mean, have you spoken to any conferences that have been online over the last year with things moving online?
Yes. I think the most recent was in Ecuador. And that was wonderful. It's kind of I really enjoy the online conference session giving, I have to admit. It's kind of, I mean, a workshop at a conference, I think is really lovely because in a live face-to-face, everyone in the room together, physical conference, because you do get conversations and feedback with people, but sometimes a larger session, it's quite difficult to get the same kind of contact. Whereas I've found with online conferences and the chat box that there's a different kind of relationship builds up between the speaker and the individuals who are listening. So like even like here, there's kind of, conversations going on in the back channel, and we can, or if we want to, dip into it or not, but you wouldn't be able to do that live. You wouldn't be able to just chat to everybody in the room. And also I really like using the chat box. So, sort of I've been in kind of a meeting with 800 people, but I ask a question in the chat box and the chat box goes absolutely wild. It's really difficult to follow, but I just love that buzz of, and then I think there's this thing of you're almost speaking individually to every single person who's there. You're not speaking to a room. You're speaking like they see you on their phone, tablet, computer, wherever they are, in their context. You're coming into their world, and I think there's an intimacy to it almost, because you see the person close up. Sort of here we are, warts and all, at the camera, and so I like them on the whole. Yeah.
Cool. One thing I would just add, like thinking about conferences, is whether you're online or in a physical conference in the future, it's definitely worth kind of taking a look at who's speaking, but also where they're from. Like whether they're freelance or if they're with a school, because I do think that conferences are a great place to make connections. Like I know certainly I've had stuff come through, like work come through because somebody's seen me speak at a conference, or even just seen my name in the conference agenda and kind of said, oh, this person has done a session about teaching young learners. Maybe they might be the sort of person we can talk to about this. And as well, for me, like the reason that I started working at Active Language was because I was going to the ATHE conference, and like Dan, and it was Dan and Danny who were presenting at that time. I was just like, wow, you know, these people, they're presenting at conferences, and you know, they're really into professional development, and that's kind of what I want. And so that was how I ended up working with Simon and Danny and Dan and Joe and Active Language, and it was great. So
it works both ways, doesn't it? Because you can find your next opportunity by seeing someone who's doing something that you're interested in and think, oh, where are they working, and could I possibly work there? And it makes things, it opens up your imagination as much as anything else, I think, to what's possible. And you kind of think about the doors that you could go knocking on in the same way that people will do the same with you. And you'll be like, oh wow, T's doing such and such a thing, and we really want to do that. We'll talk to her about it. And so it doesn't have to be presenting either, just being there, talking to people in the same workshop, and sort of just making sure that you remember the name, or why not have a card that you can give people, and meeting people. I mean, we're networking online obviously a whole lot more as well now, and that's also like sort of being active on Twitter, being active on Facebook or whatever is also obviously a way which I would say supplements rather than substitutes.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, right, we've got a couple more topics to get through.
Okay.
So teacher training. How did you first get into teacher training?
Okay, so everything starts in Italy. All roads lead from Rome. So the school that I was working at got a contract with, it worked through the teachers union. So through the teachers union and the Ministry of Education to train primary school teachers in CLIL. But basically what they needed was what I was involved in was the language support side, so that they would be able to teach their subject matter in primary schools in English. So this was kind of very, very early on in the days of CLIL in the EU. And basically small school, big contract, all hands on. And it was, whatever you can do, you do. I think having done a PGCE, so postgraduate certificate in education for mainstream education in the UK as my teaching qualification also helped, because I did know some of the shared background that they had studied as well. Even though they were primary school teachers and I'd studied for secondary school, there was a lot of it that we had in common, and I already had some of the background about the psychology of learning and so on, which wasn't TEFL-y, and so was kind of more on the same level as them. But I loved that course. That was wonderful. That was about 3 months of meetings once a week, and that was my first taste of teacher training.
Excellent. Very good. And now that you because you're training on the diploma.
I mean, I think I've had like a weird, anomalous training career, to be honest. Most of my training has been of the type in Italy, kind of inset training teachers who are moving especially into CLIL. So I've done a lot of online training for that. Initially, when I first started out as an online trainer, those were the courses that I was teaching. I think basically my main training experience up until I started on kind of formal training courses was in-house development sessions with teachers. So when I was working at International House in Madrid, we had every week there was a development session, and so giving those, but also supporting other teachers to give those, planning the program, planning the observations, all of that kind of thing, which is kind of, I guess, the other side of DOSing, which I really loved, was the teacher development side. And then I just fell into the formal training at Active. So being a Welsh speaker, that was my entry ticket. Haha, I speak a weird language that not many people speak. But it's like 200,000 of us around the world, so the likelihood of a trainee speaking Welsh is kind of fairly low. However, there have been times when Danny has said, "I'm sorry, you can't do Welsh this time. We've got a Welsh speaker on the course." But that's how I fell into training on the Trinity courses. And really, I've done very little on the cert and much more on the diploma. And I don't know if that kind of, I guess, just thinking about it now, kind of mirrors my own experience. I didn't do a cert. So it's kind of, so maybe I don't really, I don't understand the cert in the same kind of personal way. And whereas I do quite a lot of training on the diploma, and I love that. That's like, I really love that little level of personal development, teacher development. It's a moment of, like, I think explosive blossoming. And so it's really nice to be able to facilitate that. I love the facilitation side, and I hate the assessment side. I hate assessing. Not like I hate assessing people. I love the whole process of it, but I hate being the person who has to decide what grade you get.
Yeah, it's a tricky. I think it's interesting how you talk about, we think about teacher training in the bigger scheme of things, as in the Cert TESOL, the DIP TESOL, and things like that. But actually, obviously, you can be training teachers in your own school through running developmental sessions, and that's a good way as well to help you see if it's something that you actually like doing. If you can find a way to kind of manage tasks so that you go through that process of reflection and feedback and kind of see the process from that point of view. And then in terms of options, obviously there's the train the trainer course, or most teacher training places run their own kind of in-house training scheme if you want to get into Cert TESOL tutoring or CELTA tutoring. So then it's a case of kind of looking online at who's what training centres there are and seeing if there are any vacancies.
The way in very often seems to be to you commit yourself to a centre where training is taking place, and then you show yourself as being interested and capable in whatever way that is. So it might be doing the in-house development sessions, talking at conferences, asking your ADOS, DOS, one of the trainers to help you to prepare your conference presentation or whatever, all of these things. It's a question of if you really want to do something, show an interest, talk to people who are doing it, find a way, it's kind of, but right place, right time still seems to be something that's kind of important, I think, in training as well. And that we know that you can orchestrate right place, right time as well if you're listening to opportunities.
Although saying that now, with a lot of courses being run online, there are a lot more opportunities to be in the right virtual spot.
Absolutely.
You don't necessarily have to go to that place, go to that centre and start working there in order to get
you. And there are e-moderation, they're called, but it just means tutoring online. E-moderation courses, certificates that you can take, and they are typically 4 weeks, and I did 2. just why not? So another couple of call outs. I did my first with the Consultants E. I would massively recommend that. That's when I did it, it was a general e-moderation course, and now it also ties in with the online CELTA. And recently, someone said to me, "Oh, this job you might be interested in. I can't apply for it because I don't have an e-moderation certificate." And I thought, interesting. I wasn't interested in it, but it was that thing of, okay, so the certificate, I'd done the certificate because I felt like, oh, whoa, this is a whole new world that I want to be in on, because my kids were little at the time. I was at home. The easiest thing for me was to be able to work from my balcony or my kitchen. And so, and I decided to, well, I'm going to do this course, see what it's about. If I like it, fantastic. And it was wonderful. It was kind of like relatively new in terms of ELT at the moment, although obviously a really established method of teaching. And I got a job from someone else who was doing the same course. So and I immediately started on tutoring on a course as soon as that course had finished. But I also did the International House certificate for teaching online, which was really kind of the precursor to the training to teach CELTA online, which now exists. Very similar, 4 weeks on both courses. The tutors were absolutely amazing, and a lot of the learning came from seeing how they did things, basically. And so if you're interested, do one of those 2 courses. They're doable whilst working. They're not, they're not easy, but probably with 5 or 6 hours a week, you can do it.
We'll be sharing links in the notes, by the way, because obviously we're chatting and not adding things to the chat on Facebook at the moment, but we will make sure we get links to you.
So that, in fact, training there, it's easier to get trained for training and to have more often. And I think that there are a lot of places actively looking for online trainers.
Excellent. That's good to know. He's interested in training. I know a couple of people that have recently joined the hub have done the train the trainer course. So perhaps they might want to share their experience.
Okay, Paul is saying, I've just noted, so he's saying he's a tutor on the IH Cult course. Okay.
Okay, so let's move on to materials, because I know that this is probably another area that a lot of teachers are interested in getting into. So you said your first kind of materials experience was this pair work book. And so that was something that obviously came from you.
Okay, so as I say, the school I was working at, the owners were also materials writers, and they'd written, or one of the courses that they'd written was a lower secondary school course for the Italian market, and we were using it in the school whilst it was being written. So we were piloting the material. So it's quite interesting to see the behind the scenes of materials writing, which you, again, kind of, it was just happened to be there and see that and think, oh, that's fascinating. And also think, we can do that. But then at the time we kind of thought, right, well, what's missing here? And this was just before the huge explosion of photocopyable resources for teachers and the reward packs. So this didn't exist at all. And we were just, so constantly supplementing our classes with extra speaking tasks, basically. But what our idea was that we wanted to create something that wasn't just the A-B pair work stuff, which existed at the time, that was a complete unit, as it were. So it would have a warmer with some kind of listening text, which would be a model for the task itself, then some kind of support for the task, and then some kind of review. So it would go through the whole, this would sound very familiar to someone on the dip. I must admit we did this just after I'd done the dip. So this is like this little dip lesson, and we wanted to write these little dip lessons. And so we put a couple of units together, and then we sent them around to all of the publishers. At the time, there was like the big 7, I think there were at the time. I'm not going to be able to remember who they all were. Some still exist, some don't. And we got rejection after rejection after rejection. It was like 7 or 8 months later, we got a letter from, and this is in the time of snail mail, no emails, from OUP, Oxford University Press, saying that they were looking for authors to write supplementary speaking tasks for the Headway series. And that's how, and so our idea of these kind of, whole lesson, dip lesson type things became a pair work supplementary book. But it was great. It was a great experience. We had a fantastic editor, Pam Murphy, and it was fun. as well. We used to go to a favorite bar after school, and a little bit of background on L'Aquila is a mountain town, very sadly hit by an earthquake 10 years or so ago. So probably that's when it hit the news. Nobody knew where it was before. But in the middle of winter, it would be like -20 at night. And so there are these wonderful bars you could go to and have hot punch, or, and that's where we used to sit down and plan our materials for the first project. So great.
Fantastic. And then so having that first contact through OUP, that led on to kind of more writing work.
Not with OUP, no. After doing the MA, I was working for International House in Madrid. I went to the DOS conference in London, which is held every year and is now the managers and trainers conference, and just at a networking event there, and someone who was working for Macmillan but had been working for IH just said, "Oh, we're looking for writers for this, and have you done any writing, and you interested?" It was, of course. And that's how we got into writing for Inside Out.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic.
So, and that was David Riley, another mentor of mine, an amazing guy, sadly missed.
And so what tips, I mean, we've talked about kind of being in the right place at the right time, but what other tips would you give people who are thinking about getting into materials?
So I think a way in for a lot of people in the past has been through One Stop English and their lesson plan competition. Mm-hmm. Watch out for other lesson plan competitions. For example, if you know of the IATEFL special interest groups, the MORSIG, which is the material writing special interest group, they run lesson plan competitions. Recently, one was tied into a scholarship for the IATEFL conference. Once that goes live again, then that person will be sponsored. And then that obviously gives you a profile already that you've got, like a budding portfolio, as it were. Other people do it through blogging. Mm-hmm. So you may set up a blog where you share lesson materials, share through Twitter, share through Facebook. Basically, if you're interested in materials writing, write materials. And I think probably any teacher who is at all interested is already writing lots of materials for their own classroom. And circling back to what you were saying about conferences, I think that's the way to showcase them as well, is to choose something from the materials that you're writing that you think you're really proud of, works really well in your classroom. Take it to a conference, showcase it, tell the world why you're proud, tell the world why it works, explain how other people could do the same. And you never know, like T said, you might have someone in the audience who goes, oh no, that's really interesting, because that's what we're developing at the moment. And that's how things work generally, is that the publishers have a development plan. They know what it is they want to publish. They know what it is they want to publish years beforehand. But they'll only have kind of like a global idea of it, and they won't have worked out all of the details and the nitty-gritty, and they certainly won't have staffed it. They will be looking for authors, and very often, I mean, like for me, the first thing was that pair work thing, but that was our idea, and then it turned into this supplementary material. The resources for the teacher's book are very often contracted to maybe even different authors. So you might have one resource book has got maybe 10 different authors, right? You might write 3 or 4 worksheets. It's a great way to start. Teachers' books, trainers are in high demand for writing teachers' books, because obviously trainers are well positioned to be able to write support notes on how to use the material for teachers. So if you're a trainer, you want to get into materials writing, that might be a route. How do you know they're looking for teachers writers? You just network, you find out, or you do what we did, you send emails, you find out who is a publishing commissioner, or maybe you have a contact with an editor that you met somewhere somehow on Facebook or in a conference, and use those contacts, ask them who to get in touch with. That's what we did when we sent out our letters. We nabbed someone, took her to the pub, told her about our idea. She gave us some advice. One useful piece of advice was, don't write the whole book, just write a couple of samples to share, a syllabus. You can pretend you've written the whole book if you want, but don't write it. And yes, Michelle, and on LinkedIn. Yeah, absolutely. LinkedIn, another great place for sharing your lesson materials and ideas as well, not just contacting people, but being seen to actually be doing something proactively. Yeah.
Having that presence, building a presence.
Yes, exactly. I mean, we all need to work on online presence. Yeah, it's not something we can ignore.
And well, hopefully in the future we'll be talking to somebody who's self-publishing, so we can kind of
wonderful. Yes,
opinion as well.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of teachers out there, you know, like you say, they're creating their own materials, and although there are a lot of resource sites like Busy Teacher or Teachers Pay Teachers, sometimes it's actually worth going the whole hog, setting up your own website, setting up your own business, and selling your own materials and getting all the profit for yourself.
Absolutely, and knowing about it, how that works from behind the scenes is really important for it to be, you know, sort of less daunting. Because for me, I look at self-publishing and I think, daunting, just in the same way as running a business. This kind of like, a whole book. No. I write for someone else, but I think it's totally manageable. You know, sort of, and there are courses out there as well too. I think the ITDI, they run a course on self-publishing, run by Dorothy Zemak, who is a wonderful editor, self-publisher, independent publisher for other people. A great place to start out as well, to find out about e-publishing.
And also the ELT Teacher to Writer, they
yes, absolutely. Yeah,
how to write materials, how to write listening lessons.
Those are all fantastic resources. Absolutely, yeah. And ELT Freelancers is another group who have a space on Facebook, and they also offer a lot of support and advice. And webinars on authoring tools or how to approach publishers or any kind of how-to guides.
Excellent. Well, we've been chatting for an hour, and there were some other things that we kind of had on our list, but we won't get round to today because I don't know if there's been any questions. I kind of lost. I like saying, "Oh yeah, it works on my phone," and then of course,
and then losing it. Yeah, or not having time to read through it.
So if anybody's got a question, if they want to post it quickly now, and then we'll see if we can answer any questions, and if not, I'll have a look through the comments when I'm writing up the notes and see if anything has come up that anybody wants us to have a look at. Ceri, I could listen to you all day, says Olivia, and I completely agree. I love chatting to Ceri.
I love chatting to team.
There's so much love in the TEFL Development Hub. It's great.
Yeah.
Definitely, like every Thursday, whether it's a coffee break or a webinar, I just get this warm, fuzzy feeling.
Yeah.
It's a nice way to spend my Thursday mornings. Nice way to almost end the week.
I'm just having a look here as well at the.
A great question from Phil. Where is the money in ELT? If you meet a very rich ELT person, I'd like
ask them.
Yeah.
I remember one tiny little thing I remember from the business module I did was that really running your own school, the profit margins are low. So there is money, but you'd have to have a huge turnover for that small profit margin to make you ultra rich.
Yeah.
And the the TEFL millionaires, as one once was, were Liz and John Saws, who wrote Headway. Were
Ah,
I think they were the head of the list, along with Raymond Murphy, Grammar in Use. But sadly, the days of those huge big courses with massive royalties have gone. We've missed that boat, but I'm sure there are TEFL millionaires somewhere else as well. I don't know where. Like any industry, there's a tiny little tip, isn't there, of the iceberg?
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's definitely a kind of profession that people get into for a love, whether it's a love of teaching or a love of traveling. For some people, that opportunity to experience different cultures
Yep.
and be a part of the community in different parts of the world. I mean, that is one thing that we haven't talked about, talking about where other ways we can develop, thinking about teaching in different environments. Like all of my teaching has been in Spain and a little
Yep.
bit of British summer schools, but the experiences of people who've taught in Japan versus people who've taught in Chile versus people who've taught EAL in North America, everything, so many things.
So much, so huge. It's such a
So
huge,
so huge. So
huge
we've
world.
kind of got the tip of the iceberg of different ways that
Yeah. And in fact, our backgrounds are very, very similar, aren't they?
Yep,
So
yep. Yeah, so definitely we'll try and find some other people with other experiences to come along to share with you over the next however long we're in the hub. Well, great. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining. In the next 2 weeks, so in 2 weeks' time, we have a webinar with Rachel Roberts, who's going to be talking about teacher self-care, which is obviously a very important topic at any time, but I think particularly now, when a lot of people are working online and the intensity of spending so much time online away from loved ones, not being able to socialize in some cases because of lockdown restrictions and so on. So we'll be looking forward to chatting to her. Quick reminder that next week is Progress Hangouts week. So on Tuesday at 11 a.m. or Friday at 5 p.m. Spanish time, CET, come along to those. And also next Thursday, we'll be having our fortnightly coffee break, 11 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, whichever one you would want to join. So huge thank you again to Ceri.
Thank you, team.
And yeah, we'll keep in touch with any questions that you have, and I'll send out the notes with lots of links next week. Enjoy the rest of your week, everyone. Bye.
Bye.